This is a Film Stories original podcast.
We made this.
Welcome to the Starlight Ballroom. Hey!
Hello and welcome to Shipwrecked and Comatose, a Red Dwarf podcast right here on the We Made This podcast network. We are rocketing straight into series 2 of our podcast, and my name's Mark. I am one of your regular hosts. With me at this time is Kurt North. Hello, Kurt.
Hello. Welcome. Are we going to have a full season discussing androids is my question.
I mean, we could, but we're not going to.
Oh, never mind. Okay.
Also with us is Carl Bryan. Hello, Carl.
Hello there. How are you doing today?
I'm all right. Welcome back to series 2, mate.
Aye, looking forward to it. It's going to be nice to get back to the main continuity after the American pilots.
They were certainly interesting.
Yes, they were.
They were, and I like the recasting, Carl, because there was a certain cast member that you placed into the show.
I did,
and I was like, "That's not that person." I was shouting at the podcast, going, "No!"
I did. I would like to officially apologise for that on this episode before I get torn. Well, I've probably already been torn apart for this after it got broadcast. I said that Jerry Ryan was cast as the cat in the second episode, and I meant Terry Farrell. I got it backwards, and I went into an alternative universe where Jerry Ryan got cast instead for that moment. Then I do apologise, and I'm fully willing to accept my punishment of being sent to the tank.
So here's the thing, right? I always crack the really tasteless joke that because I'm gay, all women look the same to me. But Carl, what's your excuse?
I got my Star Trek actresses mixed up.
Star Trek, fair enough.
Yeah. So
hey,
I'm sorry about that.
None of that, Mark. None of that.
I'm sorry. Yes, we're on a podcast network where there's 12 Star Trek shows now. Shit. I mean, Star Trek's great. I love all of them, not just The Next Generation.
And Jerry Ryan's on the one that I actually podcast about as well. But Terry Farrell,
do you know? I've not watched.
But Terry Farrell, growing up, who was the one that played the cat in the USA one. I had a thing for when I was growing up anyway, so it was more me shouting at the screen going no, and I can imagine many a Red Dwarf or Star Trek fan just shouting at Carl, and I hope the abuse wasn't too much, Carl, and hope you survived. As people know, we're recording this before it goes out, so it'll be interesting to see if anyone picks up on it or not. We might not even get any feedback, so you'll see.
Hopefully I said it quick enough that nobody noticed.
Can we not just record you saying Terry Farrell and use the wonders of modern technology to put it in? It could be a bit like one of those badly dubbed things. Carl talks something about Terry Farrell. I think that would be brilliant.
If you record it, Kurt, with a slight tinge of anger in your voice and then just go over the top of what I said.
Yeah, but let you have the Jerry Ryan. Terry Farrell.
Yeah.
It says Jerry Ryan. Terry Farrell.
In fact, Kurt, do that. Okay. Do a little edit and say, Kurt, hello, this is Kurt. I listened to this. Carl is wrong. He's apologised. It's Terry Farrell. And then cut it and just crudely paste it in the middle. I think that would be really funny.
I'll give it if I get time. It's not out for a week, is it? So I might have time to do it. Yeah, I'll see what I can do.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic.
That's really
anyway. We digress.
We do. We're at series 2. So, funnily enough, we're looking at series 2 of Red Dwarf, and that starts with Kryten, series 2, episode 1. And the first thing that made me think was, I could have sworn that Kryten was introduced later than this, and of course he wasn't. He was just kind of sat around the ship for the whole of series 2, and they never talked about him again. And then he reappeared in series 3.
Well, he goes jumping ahead a little bit to the end of the episode. He goes off to find his garden, doesn't he? He takes the space bike and and disappears, and that's how he comes back, is that he crashes and Lister fixes him. It's in the big long scroll that we get to at the start of Series 3. So Kryten does head off into the wild blue yonder and comes back immediately.
Yeah, they were kind of against having. You've mentioned this on several occasions about the not having aliens, and they thought that the sci-fi trope of having a robot wasn't there. So it was more like I don't know if it was the case, but more like a producer's thing, saying you've got to put in a robot, and they've kind of threw Kryten in, and then suddenly realised, oh, hang on a second, that episode actually worked quite well, and the idea of 4 rather than 3 came across, and and then obviously they're bringing back for season 3, and David Ross, unfortunately, and I'm sure we'll talk about this in season 3, wasn't available due to scheduling, so we get the marvellous Robert Llewellyn. So
we were fortunate, really. I mean, it's not like the guy who played Kryten in this was bad. It's just that Robert Llewellyn was, well, frankly, sublime.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think another thing as well, because I don't know whether in terms of cost, but the suit for this episode took 8 hours to put on. And I can imagine in terms of a shooting schedule, that will just really, really slow you down. So I can imagine they might have been quite hesitant to have kept Kryten on initially until maybe the makeup technology was more speedier, basically.
Anyway, let's get into it. We start with the classic theme. And again, I wanted to talk about this. As a kid, I hadn't seen the first 2 series before. I think the first series I saw was either 4 or 5, because my access was basically through VHS. And so I was really confused as a kid, because in my head, Series 1 and Series 2 came after the series I'd seen with the more modern theme tune. And I was just wondering if either of you have any weird Red Dwarf nuances from your childhood.
I the same, in that my first series was 4 that I ever saw every week on the telly. And I did the same as you, as I went back through the VHSs because they weren't going to repeat series 1 and 2. So when I first heard the original theme, I actually thought it was quite ominous. Just instead of going from the dun 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 to this slower, more methodical theme, I was like, oh, right, okay. But I did think that the what is supposed to be Lister painting the ship was a really cool title sequence, and not one that I don't think got used a great deal, that sort of method of a slow title sequence. Everything else, I can imagine at the time, was probably very jolly and sort of this, and then we've got this slow, almost menacing music and one slow shot of the establishment.
If you think about what we've had with around that time, I'm not right with my years here, because it's, I haven't done any research on this, but you've got to think of the sitcoms around this time, which would have been things like Waiting for God, or stuff like that.
Yeah.
It would have been very, very different. And as you say, having that dark, ominous, sci-fi dystopian kind of minor key kind of stuff is an interesting way of going. And that's something that I would pick up. And I know, Carl, you mentioned in the specials as well that the Holly, the different versions of Holly as well. And I think I watched the ones I watched was with Hattie rather than Norman, and it was a bit of a. It took me a while to work out what exactly happened there, because I don't think I remember literally reading that scroll too much later on, properly reading it. I used to just watch the show as the episodes, and often wonder what was the change there. And I just thought they just changed it, but there's obviously stories behind it.
Yeah.
It's it confused me initially because, as I've said before, my first series was with Hattie Hayridge, and to me she looked more sci-fi in her out with the hair and the sort of China white skin and the red lipstick. Then all of a sudden it flipped back and I saw Norman Lovett, and he didn't look as sci-fi. But then as I've watched it more, obviously that's the joke, is that he doesn't look particularly computer-like, even though he is the greatest lover that ever lived.
I think you're right, though. She looks kind of like your classic 50s pulp kind of sci-fi, doesn't she?
In that, to make a very dated reference, I think, is it Servalan from Blake 7 with a sort of very severe straight-edged haircut and things like that. I wasn't a big Blake 7 fan. I watched a bit of it just from looking into more sci-fi stuff from earlier on at the time, but I do remember that was very much the style in sci-fi and sort of women with almost extreme haircuts.
Yeah. Well, they picked that up again, don't they, in Cassandra?
Yeah.
In that episode in season 8, that's kind of got that feel to it as well. And I know Pre's slightly different, and we won't talk about Pre, because, Carl, I know you've now watched the Dave stuff, but I know that Mark hasn't.
You see, so, I'm thinking I'm not going to, and I'm going to watch them as like a first time for when we watch them. I think that might work nicely.
Yeah, I think it'd be nice. I think that now that Carl's watched it, it gives us a bit more scope to be able to bring him in for episodes. But I think, Mark, if we can keep you away from it, I think it'd be fantastic purely for that reason. So you're watching them as we're recording, to get your first kind of view on them, because that'd be really interesting. But going back to Holly, this was the season where they decided to stop pixelating him as well. They actually stopped pixelating him and just had him on screen because of that beautiful face.
Well, it's like Norman Lovett always said, that's where the money's at. Point the camera at that.
Talking about Holly, we get the classic Series 1 and 2 Holly recap, and he cracks the gag that they're alone in a meaningless universe, but still, you've got to laugh, which is a nice start, because I did indeed laugh at the first gag of Series 2.
As I say, this has been used as well to describe the series, I think, in following years, because it really does sum it up quite well, in that it's this massively pointless situation, but they're still going to have a chuckle at it because there's nothing else to do.
Yeah, well, I think that is almost... we're talking about like sort of phrases that we use a lot, and I think that I've used that quite a lot in my normal world. It's like, well, you've got to laugh, haven't you? At the end of the day. And I wouldn't be surprised if that was the genesis of that came from him saying that, because it is that deadpan, dry humour. And to be fair, the friends that I've got around me are very deadpan and can come across as arrogant in some ways when we're actually out, because we're very, very deadpan, and that's our type of humour. So Norman Levitt is our god, I think.
He's just brilliant. He's just brilliant. And the thing is, we were talking about Hattie Hayridge and Norman Lovett. They're both brilliant. It's so important to say that Hattie was great as well. And we were really fortunate, really, because imagine if she'd been CAC.
Yeah.
The show starts with a planet that shows a crashed rocket. And it then moves inside the rocket, and Kryten is inside watching his favourite robot soap, Androids. And, that's clearly the Neighbours theme, isn't it, Carl?
It is. How they got away with it, I'm not particularly sure. Because I think this must have been when Neighbours was in full, it can't have been on air for long, so it must have been in its full, initial burst of popularity. But yeah, I mean, it was a good gag because everybody recognised that theme tune straight away.
Yeah, I think so. And I loved Neighbours as a kid. It was, thinking about it, it's not so nice anymore. But it was Rolf's Cartoon Club followed by Neighbours every week.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah, thank you for reminding me about that, Mark.
Yeah, thanks for. You're welcome. I'm quite happy to ruin your childhood for you.
Yeah, thank you. But what I quite like, what I quite liked about the Android theme tune as well is, and this is just on a pure kind of primal level for today, is that androids have feelings too, and that I had that song wrapping around my head when I sent the message to you boys this morning, going, "I'm ready," and I had nothing back from you. I was silent. I was like, 15 minutes later, I was like, Where are they? I'm quite lonely, and I've got some feelings.
I was in bed because I forgot we were recording this morning.
Yeah, I did message Mark this morning going, still recording at 10, and then there's a pause, and then I saw the little dots come, and then the first word was, yikes!
Was it yikes?
It was yikes, yeah.
It was actually yikes. I am that camp, unfortunately. I'm about as camp as Kryten. Anyway, so it moves back to Red Dwarf, and they're in their quarters, where Rimmer is learning Esperanto. Lister is doing better at it, despite the fact that Rimmer's been learning for 8 years. We learn that Lister went to art college for 97 minutes while he's polishing his space bike. It's all very kind of mundane and reminding you of the kind of slow pace of what their lives must be in this empty universe, don't you think?
It does. One of the things I picked up from this scene, and I think it goes through the episode a few times, is something we've mentioned before, is realising the potential that Lister has in that he's picked up Esperanto more than Rimmer just by hearsay, basically, and just almost by passive learning, by just being near Rimmer when Rimmer's been really trying and he still can't pick it up. But also, Esperanto is essentially a language that never really took off. And it just amuses me that the whole ship, all the signs are in Esperanto, and they're learning Esperanto for no reason, because they're not going to run into anybody who listens to who speaks Esperanto.
No, they're not. And we are about a minute into the episode, and Mark's quotable Red Dwarf rears its head with, "I hope when you come, the weather will be clement. I say this all the time. When I'm meeting up with friends, I will say to them, I hope when you come, the weather will be clement." And people either get it and laugh or look at me funny.
I realised in my ongoing quest of rediscovering things that I do use in conversation and didn't realise it comes from Red Dwarf, I do use the phrase, "you can still taste the toothpaste."
Oh, right, yeah. Yeah, the 12:30 in the afternoon. That to be fair, that is totally me. That line. It's like, no, I don't want to go to university because the first classes are not till at 12:30 in the afternoon. I can't get up that early. But yeah, the toothpaste line's great, and I'd say the weather might be clement isn't one I would naturally pick out, actually, but it's interesting you say that, Mark, because it's not one that I would naturally go to.
I really like it. I think it's just silly, in a really silly way, more formal than I would ever naturally speak, and therefore I quite like it as a kind of deliberate, transgression to the way I would normally talk. I mean, I'm similarly would, I guess it's not dissimilar to greeting people with yo, because, I'm a 41-year-old homosexual white guy. I wouldn't naturally greet people with yo, so therefore I take great delight in doing that, Yeah,
totally get that. Talking slightly separate from that is there's a phrase in the town that I work in, because I don't live in the same town I work in. I'm about 20 miles away via car on the motorway, and they say mega a lot, so I kind of use that as a way of like not pushing them down, but kind of using it as a terminology for me to say, look, I'm not from round here. It's all mega, isn't it? Kind of thing. So it's just purely because it's against the grain with them.
Oh, I haven't used mega in years. I need to start saying mega more. I miss that. That's
While you're at it, I might pick up wicked again, because that's from my childhood. Oh, that's wicked. No.
Oh, no.
I found myself saying banging more often the other day. It's like, is that all right? Yeah, that's all right. Banging. I don't know where it came from, but I've just started saying banging more. Another one that's probably going to get picked up in this series and maybe future is brutal. When Lister starts saying brutal, I thought that was a really cool expression at the time.
Yeah. It is so fundamentally quotable, and I like how I've picked up something that I still use in regular conversation today, but you wouldn't have picked up, Kurt, whereas previously we've all kind of remembered specific lines, and we might use them more than each other, but you understand what I'm getting at? It's even getting to the point where it's becoming very personal that there's so much in there that we've all got our own favourite little lines that we still quote 25 years on.
A thing as well I've noticed, and this goes in with what's this Esperanto section, is because it was on BBC Two, and because essentially they couldn't swear that often, I think it probably influenced a lot of us in terms of coming up with creative insults. Like the one on it was, your father is a baboon's rump and your mother spent half of her time up against walls with sailors. Perfectly clean, but a really cutting insult. It's I think that's influenced myself, especially in the, why swear when you can come up with something creative? And I think a lot of other sitcoms at the time, like say, were probably doing that. It'd probably be, a lot of sitcoms in the present day would probably just have sworn or something like that, but not Red Dwarf because they couldn't. But they used that into a character trait almost of Rimmer, that he's got these long diatribes of insults. Same as Blackadder. Blackadder doesn't have any swearing in, as far as I'm aware, and that's got some of the best insults you'll have ever seen in comedy.
True. So Holly interrupts their fascinating Esperanto lesson, and Rimmer points out that they're bored. Holly adds to this by saying that he's added 2 notes to music, which are, I think they were bow and row, were they, or something?
Woe and bow.
Woe and bow, sorry.
Do you know what? I like the scientific accuracy of it, though. It's like from an octave to decimalized it by 2 points. And I know it's crude, but it gets me every time. So the women are going to be banned from the cello. It's just like an amazing line. And it's like, okay, that's fine. But it just, and the fact that you can totally tell that Norman Levitt's reading it when he's going through it as well. It's incredible. I just think it's a wonderful gag, and it's just amazing that he's that bored that he's said, well, do you know what? I'm going to change it, and I'm going to call it Whole Rock as well, which is incredible. I think it's a great reintroduction to Holly, actually, for a second season audience.
I think it's actually a great reintroduction to all 3 of these characters, and perhaps it's not quite as good a reintroduction to, maybe it is for the cat, where they find him. Holly says that they found a signal, and then the boys go and collect Cat on the way. Cat's kind of looking for a mouse, and it's just not quite as funny when they collect the cat, I didn't think.
I think it's very cat-like, though, that when they do get him, they're like, oh, come on. He sort of acts a little bit like, oh, I'm not coming with you. And then he blatantly starts running after them. I think one thing that's worth mentioning in this reintroduction is how much more colour there is, in terms of everybody's got more colourful clothing on. The sets have got more colour in. They've obviously looked at it and got. I know they've mentioned that the grey tends to last through series 1 and 2, but just from this initial one, you can really see a lot more. It's a lot more striking visually,
but more contrast. There's more contrast to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think they've made an effort, not quite enough effort, but they have made an effort which isn't acknowledged normally.
Yeah, I think as well, from this series onwards, you see a real leap in the cat's wardrobe as well. It was all the zoot suits in the first series, and then from here on, he's got, in some episodes, he's got sort of 2 different outfits, and they're all, they're very 90s, or late 80s, early 90s, but they're fantastic. We'll get to one of them in a minute, but...
Yeah. So they get to the control room, and the distress call is from Nova 5. And they are running low on supplies. Kryten appears on screen asking for help and says there are 3 survivors and they are all women. Rimmer bigs himself up and says he's the captain and that he'll help out, and they're 24 hours away. And at this point, Lister emphasises they're definitely not on the pull.
This is one of my favourites, is when Chris Barry goes into the hero voice with the "fear not, I'm the bloke who used to clean the gunk out of the chicken soup machine." And the fun bit about it is he's right. If you came across somebody looking for help, you wouldn't tell them that that's what you were. It's sort of because they'd immediately like, oh, we're screwed. we've run the first people we've come across, and they're chicken soup machine repair people.
Yeah, I can't imagine anyone not basically saying that, can you? You would either just avoid it altogether and just like, say, oh, we'll come and help you kind of thing. But you definitely wouldn't say, oh, yes, by the way, just so you know, we're bums.
Yeah.
And looking through my notes, I actually think this could be the most quoted episode of Red Dwarf in my head, because going through it, there's 5 or 6 things that are still very kind of regular in my life, and only 24 hours and first in the shower room are definitely things I say. If if I've got like a deadline, I'll be like, only 24 hours. And if like I'm going out with friends or whatever, I will also quote first in the shower room. And I just fucking love the cat, don't I?
You do. I don't know if anyone's got this yet. I mean, we're what? Maybe 11 episodes, 12 episodes into the podcast. I think people may have got that mark.
He's so slinky. He's so slinky in the way he moves. When he sort of glides out of the door and then glides back in to say all 6 of his nipples are tingling.
Yeah.
And then just it's almost like he's not walking. He's on like a treadmill. He's so smooth. I mean, I can imagine a lot of that is from Danny John Jules's dance background, but he's so perfect in the role. As we said, I got caught up on all the Dave stuff, and he's still, even this I think they're all in their sort of 50s by this point. He's still so lithe.
Yeah. I mean, the Dave stuff the Dave stuff. I mean, it's, as you say, the dancing, the kind of on point. He knows how to like. He's used his body. He's not like staccato in a way. He's not that kind of dancer. He's more of a, musical background. So it's rather than being like, say, a beatbox or a break dance or lock and pop and stuff like that. He's very much a glider. Mm. So and that really works. I know there's a bit of Michael Jackson in there occasionally in bits and bobs, but that goes to how how that influences the system as well. But as I say, as Carl said there, the later stuff, he's still got it, and it still is needed because it works to a really good effect, and it actually emphasizes the joke that's on display at that time. So the fact that he can still do that at whatever age he's at now is really, really good. And as Carl said, I'm looking forward to hearing your reactions to the Dave stuff. So that's all great.
I mean, when he was on, was it Dancing with the Stars? He was on, or
he was on Strictly Come Dancing.
When I heard he got announced for that, I initially thought, well, that's not fair, because he's got years of dance and music. I was surprised he didn't win, because he's a fantastic dancer. I initially thought he was going to go from being, he'll probably finish in the top 10, what everybody else would have thought. And I'm like, no, he's the one to watch. So I was very surprised he didn't win that, because he's blatantly a fantastic dancer.
Mm. Did he do well?
He got about halfway through, I think, but he didn't want to come back afterwards, because I think he made a bit of a stink at the time that I think it was a conspiracy that he was voted off. But I think he might have just been a bit, obviously as a trained dancer, if I lost to someone from, say, Geordie Shore in a dancing competition, I'd be a bit annoyed as well.
True.
Yeah, well, that's the thing with those programs, isn't it? Because the underdogs are the people who are the most, and I don't mean this from Danny Don Jules' point of view, because he's obviously a very funny guy and a very good dancer, but from a public perception at maybe the time he was there, yes, he's well known, but he's not a new reality TV star or an MP who can't physically dance. He's someone who's probably middle of the road in that regard, because he's a trained dancer. Well, he should be doing that. And where does his fan base come from? And I know it would be Red Dwarf, but would they really kind of push that out there? Really,
there's not a lot of crossover between Strictly and Red Dwarf fan base wise, I don't think.
Well, no, I don't watch Strictly, and I actually quite like to dance as well, but. I mean, for a number of different reasons, I don't watch it purely because, like Mark, I'm out on a weekend generally with wedding gigs and stuff. But even so, it's not something that really floats my boat with that.
So we enter the wonderful getting ready montage where Lister is hammering his socks, ironing his trousers, spraying over the hole in his trousers, and this music plays in my head every time I'm in a rush. Yep. Every time I'm rushing to get ready for something, this music hits my brain, and I suppose it could be worse.
It's such a simple bit of music, but it's so effective, isn't it?
Yeah. It's a walking bass line, and I'm a bass player, so for a start off, it's great. But what I like about it actually is because it's very slapstick. It's very kind of, unreal. Because even to the point where I think, for me personally, this is the first time that I felt that they were playing off the audience. Because you mentioned that bit with the jeans and the back pocket. He was spraying that until the laugh kind of sort of started to wane, and then he stepped out of it. So it was almost like the timing was like with the audience rather than it being aligned. Now, yes, you've got Me Too, which was maybe a bit different, but this one to me is the one that kind of recalls the most. Where yes, it was ridiculous. It's no way this would ever work. But at the same time, that Craig Charles is playing off the audience, and that's what I get from this episode every time I see it.
I think there's a definite feeling of they're feeling a lot more comfortable in what they're doing this series.
There's a confidence, isn't there?
Yeah, the reveal of the hole in the back of the jeans, I thought was great in the fact that he managed to keep that hidden from the audience until he turned round.
Yeah.
The
blocking was really good on it, yeah.
From that, and when Rimmer walks in, you can tell that Chris Barry is waiting for the laugh to die down before delivering his line.
So yeah, Rimmer walks in, and he's in full regalia, and he basically takes the piss out of Lister, who responds. And Rimmer responds to that by saying that he always puts him down in front of girls, and asks him to not do that this time. He suggests that perhaps he might call him Ace or Big Man. And he also mentions that no one ever called him Ace, despite how many times he let them beat him up. And I think it was really funny, and then suddenly it was really sad. And that one kind of hit me quite hard. Did you feel as strongly about that, Kerr?
Well, the thing that I think in hindsight, hearing the word Ace for a start of, it's like like I've just said there, it's like because you know what's coming, and you know that you mentioned about the fact that that's the way he got beaten up and things like that, and strangely enough, I was thinking about this as we've been recording, like maybe 5-10 minutes ago, that I think I've mentioned that I think throughout the actual seasons we're going to relate in some way to certain things. I was bullied as a kid at school, and it took me a while to actually end up turning around and try to punch the lad. You know what I mean? It took me ages. They pulled at my hair at one point, and I lost it completely.
Good.
But I've got a high threshold of like being able to take stuff like that, because it's water off a duck's back to me, and it didn't really affect me, but it was just the relentlessness of it. So the fact that, so yes, there is that relatability with what Rimmer's going through there. And I think it adds depth to the character. And I think that the first 2 episodes here really start to like add depth to Rimmer, because I think that as much as we've talked about last season about how he's up and down, and, I'm sure we'll talk about this towards the end of this episode, that we do find, we need that balance. You need that balance there. I think you mentioned it in the specials where you were talking about the American version was all the rough parts of Rimmer put in with none of the empathy and none of
we did
the other things that make it deeper. And this scene particularly does that in the way that it makes you feel for him, but it also sets up the gag later on, and while also deepening Rimmer's character. And I think it does a really good job of all three, all in the space of a couple of seconds, 10-15 seconds of dialogue.
It's a real insight into his sadness and his paranoia, and the depth of the character that is kind of Weasley for laughs, but there's also a real kind of background to why he's like that?
I think the first 3 episodes of this series, this one, Better Than Life and Thanks for the Memory, lay a lot of groundwork for the backstories on a lot of Rimmer and Lister, definitely. Especially with the parents. Yes, as a larger gentleman, I've been called big man. Normally, when I used to work in pubs, if ever I was telling someone to get out, I used to hear a drunk call me big man as a term of trying to soften me up a bit, so I'd let them stay. And so that I used to work for a lad I used to call big man as well.
Do you think it came from Red Dwarf? Because I'm pretty sure me using big man to fondly describe people definitely comes from this.
Yeah, I think it came from this for me as well.
So we move on where just after Rimmer suggests that Lister wear his Mingy moon boots, and we're back at the crashed rocket, and Kryten is flustered, and then there's the big reveal that the women are all skeletons.
Yes, just before we get to that bit, I just want to bring it up. Is we missed probably one of the best sections I think there is in any Red Dwarf episode, which is they've run out of milk. This is probably one of Norman Lovett's best bits, I think, in the entire series. Just the delivery and the timing on, dog's milk lasts longer than any other type of milk. Why? Because no bugger will drink it. And
I didn't want to spoil it as well. There's the deadpan line when he says, I didn't want to spoil it. Why didn't you tell me? Well, I didn't want to spoil it.
Yeah.
The thing is, I've missed that, but that's because this episode is so tight and the gags are so constant and brilliant that I think I've got it in my notes, but I've skipped past it because there's so much to talk about in one 28-minute episode.
It's really packed. I think this is the first time. Is this the first time we go off ship?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Because it's the first time we see Blue Midget.
First time we see Blue Midget. It's our first planet as well that we see. The models are beautiful in this episode. The model of the Nova 5 crash looks fantastic.
And Blue Midget's great too.
Yeah, I was going to say, is it the first planet? Or the one last season was a moon, wasn't it? Am I thinking season 2? They go off onto a moon, don't
That's Thanks for the Memory, where they go drinking.
Is it?
Yeah.
Maybe I'm thinking season 2, yeah. Okay. Yeah, well, I think it will be then, yeah. It'll be the first time Blue Midget, first time off planet, yeah. Off Red Dwarf.
And so the smelly boots are stinking out Blue Midget, and Kat arrives in a gold space suit, and Holly is wearing a toupee. Rimmer's got rolled up socks in his trousers. They're all clearly not on the pull.
The boots. I've never seen a more accurate visual representation of something stinking.
Yeah.
You look at them and just go, oh, they're gross.
But jumping back on that, the thing that it's absolutely perfect. The fact that it plays into Lister and Rimmer's personalities again, because going back to the end of last season with Me Too, and the play on, where would the tape be? It would be outside of Lister's quarters outside, and confidence, paranoia, and all that kind of thing. And then obviously Me Too with the two Rimmers getting together and dealing with their own aspects. But here you've got Rimmer dissing Lister for what he's wearing. He's wearing his least smeggy clothes. You've got also Rimmer saying, go and get your boots. And Lister's going, but you made me put them in the airlock. And Rimmer's going, no, they're fine. And it's the fact of that as Mark has said before, that brotherly connection, that the personalities within them, that they're both playing off each other. And they're trying to gain points already because of the three women that they're going to see. And I think that really works well. And as you say, the visual representation of these boots that you went, no, those smart black shoes that you were wearing or whatever they were, they're not good enough. You're going to have to use you're going to have to wear the boots. No, the boots are fine. The boots are fine. And then to see them and then have Rimmer's obviously facial reaction is just is a wonderful playoff on that and the dynamic of the two of them.
It's a 7 or 8 on the nostril scale, isn't it? It's almost fully flared. The spacesuit. I was looking into sort of things that probably weren't there when they wrote it. Just the thing of Lister didn't need to do a great deal to improve on himself. Almost he only had to put on a different t-shirt and jeans and he looks way more presentable, but Rimmer has to go completely over the top and do the thing. And then the thing to me that was sort of, now the cat is on his own essentially in terms of cat people, and he's not with the priest or looking after the priest anymore from season 1. Now he's doing things like making spacesuits and things like that. So that's how he's passing his time. That I want to know who's got that suit, because it's an amazing bit of outfit.
I mean, memorabilia-wise, that's an incredible thing to own. I know. I don't know how much your Doctor Who knowledge is, but I actually know the guy who owns the Candyman suit from the Seventh Doctor.
Oh, was it The Greatest Show on Earth? Is that what that one's called?
No, Greatest Show on Earth was the one set in the circus. The Candyman was in the Happiness Patrol.
That's it.
And he looked like an evil Bertie Bassett, and the BBC got in a lot of trouble for it. But I know the guy who he bid on that suit at a Doctor Who convention, and it cost him like thousands of pounds.
Yeah, it's. Part of me wonders if this golden spacesuit is probably It may just be because it was sort of 80s materials, whether it just dissolved over the years. Yeah. It's just polystyrene, like sort of backpack. You know, it looks like it's been a reconstituted like Ghostbusters backpack, doesn't it? The helmet,
kind of thing.
The helmet's amazing.
Did I dream it, or was there a Red Dwarf like museum at one point, or is that Doctor Who? That's
Doctor Who. There was one in Cardiff. I think it's still there, the Doctor Who Experience.
There should be a Red Dwarf one.
I can't see why not. There's enough things to go in there. You know, but again, maybe some of the things like the polymorph have just completely... I think that's why they changed it for Emo Hawk, is the original polymorph was like, it's destroyed, it's died in storage. Anyway.
Yeah, that would have been... Yeah, that sounds likely, but also really quite a shame.
Yeah, I bet you could do the display of the 3. You just need to get some statue skeletons and then just put the uniforms on from the Nova 5. You could have that as a display in the Red Dwarf Museum.
You could.
You could, yeah.
So, Kryten greets the boys and they follow him, but the cat gets stuck at a mirror because he's so attractive. Kryten asks if Rimmer speaks Esperanto, and Rimmer does a really bad blag, and they finally get to the dining room, and they see the 3 skeletons. Kryten goes to get the tea, and Rimmer tells Kryten that they're dead, and then Kryten's genuinely very upset and doesn't know what to do.
It's one of my favourite, and this is me quotable line, right? I often, when someone comes in and says something, I'm like, well, I've only been gone 2 minutes. I say that so much. I was watching it last night with my other half, and before it got to this point, she actually quoted it back at me. So I think that it's just played perfectly. It's just because one of the questions I was going to ask you both is that we get the reveal of them being dead is before we get the gag. So we get them seeing that they're dead, and then Kryten doing his little bit and serving them and stuff, and then going away. And obviously that's for that. But the reveal to us is we're ahead of it a little bit. So do you think that the two could have been put together, or do you think it works better with the way it's set up? Because there's the setup of, he's ace, he's a big man, he's this, he's that, and that plays onto the joke first off, and then the second one is obviously the reaction of Kryten, and it leaves you not thinking about anything else other than Kryten's reaction.
I think it's better that they're separate, purely from the build-up of Rimmer. Sort of how much he's really going for this, and his reaction, because it's his reaction that it focuses in on, with the deep bow and the Shamita and that. And from what I gather, I think this bit was shot before the Kryten bit, and they actually had a sheet up on the live thing, and they dropped it as Rimmer's doing the Shamita, so the audience see it, which is probably why the reaction is so big, because they've just revealed that, they're all dead.
Right, okay. That makes more sense then, because obviously from an audience, from a TV point of view, you're kind of slightly ahead of it, aren't you? Just slightly. Well, yeah, you are ahead of it because you've seen it before, and before they get there.
But this scene is full of prime Red Dwarf quotable, hilarious lines. And the one that gets me every single time is, "My mate Aesir is incredibly brave." Oh, that's just, that callback, man. That was so perfect.
It's the perfect payoff.
It's wonderful.
Yeah. It's had lots and lots of girlfriends.
And I don't use it anymore. I wouldn't say I'd use it now, but when I was a kid, I would definitely tell my brother to smeg off dog food face regularly. I don't use it so much now, but that as a kid, because like you were talking about, the lack of swearing but the creativity, that I stole that at the time when I was like 14, 15.
Yeah, the thing that I like about it is I like the way the cat reacts in this as well. In the he's initially, he's not giving up. So hi baby, he's really not giving up. But then when Lister starts doing my friend Ace here is incredibly brave, the cat starts nodding along, sort of just how he's immediately in on the plan to take the mickey out of Rimmer. And I love how angry Chris Barry gets in this, because it was almost like, what are you going to do? He's like, he can't touch anybody, but when he says he's warning Lister, there's not a lot you could do about it, but he's just got to stand there and seethe.
But the thing is, it's so masterfully done. You've got really heavy on the gags, all the payoff, and then you've got the real, actual, genuine tragedy of Kryten's loss and how forlorn he is. It's so well done.
Yeah, and I think from a technical point of view, it's interesting what they do, because I don't know if you noticed, but there's a lot of Dutch angle camera movements in this, or camera placements in this episode, in this scene in particular. Now, you could say, well, that's because the actual ship is Nova 5 is actually on an angle anyway, so they're kind of like informing you of that, because you'll see that a lot of the tables are slightly like at a diagonal. But using a Dutch angle and low angles kind of puts you in a bit of state of unease generally. But I think they use it here as more of a like, well, how's he gonna react to this? You know, and I think that by doing that, you naturally put off a little bit, and then when you hear him deliver those lines, and you hear the rest of them deliver the lines, you're with them, because you're not necessarily just watching it. You've got this like subconscious thing of like, we are on this unsteady ship, what's going on, kind of thing. And I think that works really well. And I can't think of anything before this where they would use a Dutch angle in that way, but it does actually inform the fact that this ship is actually on a but not a cliff edge, but definitely a crash ship.
Does it reveal how long they were there for? And I think it gets mentioned in future series, sort of how he was there for a long time, obviously long enough for the crew to be skeletons, but was he there for sort of hundreds of thousands of years, or do you think he'd been there for not that long?
I think the way it infers, I think that there is like, he's been there for a long time. I can't remember exactly what was said though.
No, I don't think it is said, because no, it goes in as well with the sort of thing we were talking about with the sadness. It does say they've been dead for centuries. That's it, yeah.
Well, the level of decomposition would suggest that, I think.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but I'm just saying that the way that it's kind of delivered, it almost feels like they're saying, are you a doctor? It's that kind of like, it's like, what do you mean they've been? I've been, it's the way it's played. It's almost like he's been serving them for centuries as well. That's the way it infers.
Oh yeah,
to me
definitely.
Anyway.
He's been serving them all this time.
Yeah, again, it ties in with that thing of there's a lot of sadness in these first couple of episodes, and his realization and the what am I going to do? It's heartbreaking. He's been there for centuries, and he's just it's finally settled in that he doesn't have to do this anymore, or that he's never needed to do it. He's wasted a lot of time.
Just a question on that scene as well, because he says they've got less meat on them than a chicken McNugget, apparently. But in the American ones, the Mc is edited out.
Yes.
Oh, there's a different version.
I noticed that on the one I watched. I think it's for the DVDs as well, because it's very apparent that Chris Barry says McNugget. But yeah.
Didn't spot that, but I'm a fan of 2000 AD, and for donkey's years, there was a Red Dwarf. There was a Judge Dredd story that they couldn't republish because they took a pop at McDonald's, and McDonald's basically took them to the cleaners. And it was only a couple of years ago that they could re-release it with new laws on satire. They could actually re-release it with those couple of comic strips included in the story. It was called the Cursed Earth Saga, and for years it was incomplete when it was published in graphic novel form.
That was one of the biggest ones as well, wasn't it? The Cursed Earth Saga.
Yeah, so I wouldn't be surprised if McDonald's gave the BBC an elbow in the ribs for that, thinking about it.
Chicken ribs.
McRibs.
Oh,
That's us cancelled in America now. Sorry. I know Michelle Milbauer from America listens to this, so it's I'm sorry if this doesn't get to air. I'll speak to you separately.
So they head back to Red Dwarf on Blue Midget, and Kryten highlights that he's programmed to serve. What's he going to do? And when they get back to Red Dwarf, Rimmer completely takes advantage of this, comes up to Kryten and gives him lots and lots of work, including... And what I like is that it includes outwitting the Scutters to clean them.
Yeah. He pokes them in the eyes that they don't have.
But it's 2 montages in one show. That's pretty ballsy.
I love the cleaning Holly's screen and Norman Lovett's reaction.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he's brilliant.
It's priceless. It's absolutely priceless. I actually mentioned that as we were watching it again last night. It was just like, I just love that. I love that like reaction to him. He just looks down in the corners like, what are you doing?
You wouldn't think he'd be able to do much physical comedy being just ahead, but Norman Lovett does manage it, and he does it so well. I can imagine a lot of other actors would be like, well, I'm just ahead, I'm just going to deliver lines and try and do it that way. But Norman Lovett manages to work a full performance in, even though he's just ahead.
And I think that's completely true. And I really like how Norman Lovett clearly cares about the part as well. He's not just kind of... You could see how someone might treat it as almost like as a voiceover gig.
I mean, originally, I think that's what he was, though, wasn't it? It was only due to him complaining that it's without being thoroughly disrespectful to Norman Lovett, it's a really good job he's got a funny face. Because...
But I think he's that dry that he would probably say that himself. So
it's something that I think if he didn't have that expressions on his face, I don't know if they'd have agreed to make Holly visible. So I remember, I think it's in one of the books or in one of the makings of, they talked about seeing Norman Lovett do stand-up, and he stood there and he didn't say anything for a good 5 or 6 minutes. He's just looking at the audience, and eventually people start giggling and then laughing, from him looking slightly puzzled at the audience at what they're laughing at. And then at the end of it, he just goes, "What?" And it brings the house down. And I think just the power of Norman Lovett's sort of facial expressions and how to use his face and his head in this case is really on display.
Mm. I agree. So Lister's on his bike and he arrives at his quarters to see that it's been completely cleaned and his laundry is immaculate. And Kryten has even thrown away his pet mould. And Lister questions why he does this and why he likes it. And what would he like to do other than this? And Kryten talks about androids. And he then says he also has strange thoughts when he's asleep, which I thought was adorable because he doesn't know that they're dreams. And he dreams of a garden. And then he shows Lister his huge list of tasks from Rimmer. And Lister's really quite angry about it. And I think this says a lot about Lister in a way, that he's kind of wants to emancipate this kind of, I don't want to say slave, but this servant.
Yeah, it's the speech David Ross gives about the garden is brilliant, and it's something that you wouldn't have got in sitcoms at the time. I don't think it's my garden, and that's I think it's a lovely little bit of work. There's just this underlying sadness behind this, what is externally portrayed as almost, he's a service droid. He shouldn't be wanting to.
Shouldn't have dreams.
He shouldn't have dreams or aspirations, but he has, and they're, incredibly valid to want the garden. I did love the little dance he did as well for singing the android's theme tune with just his arms. I was interested if that was David Ross or if that was an actual direction, but it endears you to him immediately.
As you say, Mark, I think the fact that you've got this undercurrent of slavery and the fact that of people's rights and stuff like that, and the fact that no matter who you are, you have the right to do what you want to do, obviously within the confines of the law, if that allows you to do that. Now, bearing in mind, obviously, laws back in the time wouldn't have allowed you to do that, and that was completely wrong. So I'm not saying that, but in generally in modern culture, generally, that you have the right to do what you want to do and aspire to do, and the fact that that he has that, and he's a service droid, he's a servitude, he's a slave effectively, and this isn't what he's wanting to do. Whereas Kryten, in season 3 onwards, there's a slight different retooling of that, with the fact that he actually wants to do the stuff that he's wanting to do, and it plays on it a bit more. But with the way that David Ross plays it is more like, but I'm programmed to serve, and this is who I am. I don't have any things beyond this, but I do have this one aspiration, and the fact that Lister pulls that up is a really good take on it.
Yeah, I think the exploration of Kryten is really, really sensitively done. I've talked about 80s ick in previous episodes, where there are things that I'm unhappy with my kind of like modern outlook of life. But I think the way they deal with Kryten and the fact that he is mostly pretty happy getting on with the housework, but he's got a few little bits and bobs that he's interested in and likes and does in his spare time. That's kind of like my mum. She is very happy as a housewife and always has been. And I don't feel like my mum's ever been oppressed, because she can make cards. She can go and see her friends every Monday, and I don't even know what they chat about. Probably making cards.
Smoking cigars and playing poker.
My mother does not smoke cigars and play poker. Or does she?
Just hard malt liquor.
I hope she does. If that's what she wants to do, I hope she does. But what I'm getting at is she's perfectly content and always has been being a housewife, and she's been that for 40 years.
Yeah, I lived for a time with my my great grandmother. She came to live with us, and she would go around the house. My mother was very big on what's the plate called? The blue plates with the patterns, a willow pattern. So you used to get all those plates, and she had loads of like trinkets and bits on shelves. And my great grandma would used to go round and dust and clean sort of every day, every other day. And she didn't need to do that. You know, she was in her 70s by that point, but it was what made her happy. It's what she wanted to do. She could have done anything. At that point, she was retired, but she enjoyed going around and cleaning things. It made her happy.
Yeah, I think what I'm getting at is that it's just sensitively done. It doesn't criticise people who are like that and are happy like that. It just questions people's motivations and whether or not people might be oppressed, or they're not necessarily repressed if they're happy doing that kind of, having that kind of life, you know?
No, definitely not.
And like I say, I just think it's really nicely done. And I hate picking out 80s ick. So it is worth it when you see something that was progressive and thoughtful and the opposite of 80s ick. I think it's worth highlighting that.
It's interesting because in the same episode earlier on, there is a bit which kind of I considered a bit of 80s ick, was when they saw the ladies, the cat's reaction was, is that female as in soft and squidgy? Yeah, no, there's a lot going on. I think this is going to be, as we go through, there's a lot more going on in these shows than I think we ever realised, and certainly didn't realise at the time.
And I like how it works on two levels. There's kind of like the grown-up, borderline intellectual level that we're looking at them, and there's 14-year-old Mark who lolled, you know?
Yeah.
So the final scene is Kat, Rimmer, and Kryten in the quarters, and Rimmer is being painted by Kryten. Lister shows up, and he points out that he's shown Kryten some rebellious films, but they haven't made much of an impact. So it gets to the point where Kryten has finished the picture, Rimmer has a look, and he's painted him having a shit.
I love that somebody on an Etsy board or a Redbubble has got to be selling canvas prints of that.
Right above your fireplace. Oh, that's where it needs.
If my partner would allow me to get away with that, I would totally have that on my wall. Maybe in the toilet.
Yeah, get a poster print and put it off. If you've got one of those, if you've got a bathroom where the toilet faces your door, put it on the back of the door so people close it, sit down, turn around, and they're facing Rimmer on the throne.
It's wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful.
It's a great painting, though. And obviously somebody had to sit down and do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember seeing in one of the magazines, somebody asked what's happened to that painting, and it went to Mel Bibby, the designer. I think he was the set designer, but it was in his house. So somebody did have it up in their house.
Amazing.
Yeah,
amazing. So Kryten says, "I think I'm rebelling," and Lister and the cat fucking love it. He then throws soup on Rimmer's bed, takes Lister's bike and disappears. And then the last scene is Kryten dressed like a biker and the theme hits. It's just wonderful. Just a wonderful way to end the episode. I howled with laughter at that fucking that picture. And then the middle finger and just the delivery of "I think I'm rebelling" is wonderful.
Yeah, there's so much on that. I mean, I think the one that really started to kick up, obviously you see the picture and it says, "I think I'm rebelling," and then it's the gap in between that, and it's, "What you got?"
Yeah.
It's just like, yeah, brilliant. Okay, I'm with you. You know, you've already had the setup of Marlon Brando. And the fact that he's now kind of doing what we do with Red Dwarf and actually repeating stuff like that is really brilliant.
Yeah, I like I think I'm rebelling is a good line, but I really like you can tell Chris Barry is barely holding it together in this scene. He wants to laugh so hard. I remember watching the DVD with the commentary on, and all the way through Chris Barry's like, "Yep, should have refilmed it," because he's the corners of his mouth are just going up. But when he sort of says rebelling, and then David Ross goes, I think that's what I'm doing. I love that. In that he's still not really sure. He's just got this feeling that's coming out, and he's just waiting to work out what it is. And the insults as well. I like the fact that it's the same insults that Lister said to him earlier on. So molecule mind, dinosaur breath, smeg for brains, which I think goes all the way through the series pretty much. He doesn't call him arsehole, which I think really goes on to how angry Lister was in that scene earlier on that he actually cursed and called Rimmer an arsehole, rather than these kind of playful insults that they have amongst each other. It's just a straight out Rimmer's an arsehole. His Marlon Brando impression's good as well. The swivel on it punk.
Yeah.
It really is. It's a hell of an episode, and like I say, I think it's certainly so far has got the most lines that I still quote and immediately would recognise as Red Dwarf stuff. It's a great way to open series 2. There's a real confidence to it. They've got their second series. They know what their premise is. They have an established cast, and it's just bang, Red Dwarf's back. And I think it couldn't have been better when it comes to that element of the show.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of firsts in this. It's the first time they go off ship. It's the first guest star, basically, that's a real person. I mean, you could argue there's confidence and paranoia, but they were imagined. They were constructs that Lister imagined, but this was like the first person they happened across. You've got Blue Midget in there as well. Which I love the design on Blue Midget. I think it's great. And it was so cramped, which I really enjoyed.
Yeah.
A fun thing I found out when I was doing a bit of prep for this show was I looked into the makeup side of things and how long it took, with it being the first time they ever really made the makeup, and that it took David Ross 8 hours to put it on. But the thing I found out I thought was really interesting is David Ross is claustrophobic.
Yeah, I saw that. I can't imagine doing that. The fact that you're claustrophobic and you've agreed to put on a mask over your head. I mean, to be fair, I was Darth Vader for one of the Star Wars films at my work, and I basically went around, and I'm not necessarily claustrophobic, but it was a bit of a concern to me, going, oh God, I'm going to have to be in this costume for literally hours at a time, and it was hard work. It was really hard work. You can't see anything. I had to be, guided around by Ray at that point. But yeah, so there was lots of that going on, but it's amazing how, once you kind of get beyond that, you kind of get used to it in some ways. It's still hard, but to be physically claustrophobic on top of that would be, I don't know, because I know that I would get pretty much scared if I was in like an enclosed tunnel or something for any period of time. I don't think I think I'd be fine for for the first maybe a couple of minutes, but then after that, I know I would get really kind of full on, and I've had that claustrophobic feeling before, so it would be interesting to see how we cope.
Because I mean, the process of it as well would be the put a tube in your mouth. We're about to stick a load of plaster of Paris on over your eyes as well.
Yeah,
I think just from watching the behind the scenes documentaries, I think it's like Series 6 where Robert Llewellyn eventually says, "Oh, we've got it down to an hour and a half now." So that's 3, 4, 5. Yeah, this is like three to 4 series of like 8. And gradually getting less, but still a heck of a long time to be in makeup. And I wouldn't, and I couldn't do it. It's at all. I really wouldn't be able to. I'd freak out after 5 minutes. So for David Ross to put himself through that, I think shows how much he really wanted to do it.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair.
Yeah.
But it's mad, isn't it, that these makeup jobs take so long, but you don't even think about it until you see something like that documentary.
Yeah, and it's a BBC sitcom. You don't expect a BBC sitcom to involve an 8-hour makeup job. if, as we were talking about before, the other sitcoms were like Waiting for God, and they were probably still making stuff like The Good Life at this point and things like that.
Yeah.
And if you'd gone to any commissioner and gone, this character needs 8 hours of makeup every day, they were like, no, absolutely not.
Yeah.
I can imagine there was a lot of fiddling around to get it into the budget, especially when Kryten becomes a regular character. I mean, it just goes to show that this is the start of some fantastic makeup and some fantastic costuming, and we're seeing things like, Gelfs in the future and things like that. There's some really good, it's Howard Burden, isn't it, who's the costume designer, and he is all the way through right up until this present day. I think he comes on from 2 or 3 onwards, and it's just some of the costuming as well is just fantastic.
Yeah, it is. And there's some costuming and some things that they've done over the course of it, which we'll talk about, over the seasons, that go wrong in Smeg-Ups that actually make for really good discussion as well. So the fact that, he's having to jump around and make all these wacky costumes and stuff, and and try and get them to work atomically as well as other things as well, I think is a testament to his job. And, it's probably a really fulfilling job, but at the same time, I can imagine there's a lot of head scratching and a lot of pressure and a lot of, worries over the course of the years that he's been.
Yeah, I reckon so. So that was Kryten, Series 2, Episode 1 of Red Dwarf. Is there anything that either of you wanted to talk about that we haven't covered?
There was the Gwendolyn thing, wasn't there? So the Gwendolyn was on the end of Androids, the actual title credits, and it gets used as an expletive as well. And that was to do with who was that again? That was to do with somebody.
One of the producers, wasn't it, or somebody who commissioned Red Dwarf? You're a total Gwendolyn or something like that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Another sort of Androids thing is, and I know this will happen when the special comes out for it, is in the Smegazine they continue Androids as a comic strip.
Amazing.
And I remember this from reading it at the time. It's really funny because it's still an overblown soap opera in the comic strip, and I remember it being really fun. I believe it's somewhere in our stores we have actually got copies of this magazine knocking around. I am going to reread them at some point because I really enjoyed the comic strips because they were very 2000 AD in the style. And
that doesn't sound like a bad thing.
No, not at all. And it was a really good magazine. Definitely a really good magazine.
So thank you for joining us for Series 2, Episode 1 of Shipwrecked and Comatose. Before we go, Kurt, where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me on Twitter at rmuldrake. That's RMULDRAKE. I'm on the Make It So podcast, and I'm also running the Xcast, the X-Files podcast, which is the X_cast, as well as the Millennium podcast, which is a spin-off from the X-Files, which is the Time Is Now pod.
Carl, where can people find you on the internet, mate?
Well, I've not mentioned this publicly yet, and I probably will have done by the time this episode goes out. I am going to be having my own show on the We Made This network. I am going to be having a show called Cerebral Jukebox, where I interview a guest about a song that gets stuck in their head, and then I offer to remove it from their internal memory forever, or they can choose to keep it. That will hopefully be launched by the time this episode goes out, so I'm very happy about that. If you're looking to find me online, all my projects are on one page, which is at allmylinks.com/Mr. Carl, and it's the unabbreviated one of MISTER, and I've got everything I'm up to on there.
Brilliant. And if you're looking for me, my personal Twitter is at MarkAdamsHC. I also have some shows on the We Made This podcast network. The first one is Life's Milestones, at Life's Milestones on Twitter, which is my interview show where it's linked to my job as a humanist celebrant. I talk to people about naming ceremonies and birth, weddings and relationships, and funerals and death. I'm also on a new podcast on the network called Right in the Childhood, which is where me and my friend Fraser there's a big age difference. I'm Generation X, he's Millennial, and we look at our treasured childhood shows and we kind of see whether they live up to our memories and also what someone from another generation thinks of them. And finally, I am also on Pull or Pass, which is a weekly geeky comic book show on the We Made This podcast network, and that is at Pull or Pass. So, thank you very much for joining us for Shipwrecked and Comatose. So until next time.
Elsewhere on We Made This. Cine Mortuary podcast.
Right, Rob, just to laser align and realign the topic of discussion.
Yes.
Would you like to take a dive straight in to the X-Files movie for me, please?
Yes, I would. We open on Gillian Anderson in her lingerie. No, sorry, that's the fan fiction one, isn't it, that people keep talking about?
That you wrote, yeah.
I did not write, and I will sue you, sir. Right, yes, Sounds of the Lambs. Directed by Jonathan Demme, 1991.
Pretty Fly, a 90s nostalgia podcast.
I think it says a lot about our humanity if we go down that road with Hannibal Lecter, and if we kind of, like right at the end of Silence of the Lambs, he's going to have an old friend for dinner. And... which is a great line, by the way.
Tremendous line.
It's a movie full of great lines.
Have an old friend for dinner.
But you're kind of happy for him, aren't you? Like I am.
A little bit. I think it's important to remember that even someone who's a psychopath who doesn't have, or a character that's a psychopath that doesn't have that normal range of human emotions, they are human.
Observing the Pattern, a Fringe podcast.
Why is Nina so invested in getting Tyler back? Because, she even offers to put up the money. Like, Massive Dynamics will cover the ransom. So, she's heavily invested. And then, him basically saying, yeah, I took work home with me. And so it kind of, something doesn't add up in that area.
Nina's a very intriguing character because... at least up until this point, and probably well into season 2, you are never sure of her allegiances.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network.
Shipwrecked and Comatose, a Red Dwarf podcast, was created and produced by Mark Adams and Kurt North. You can find us on Twitter at Red Dwarf Pod, and we are part of the We Made This podcast network, which can be found online at wemadethispod.com or on Twitter at We Made This Pod.